Hey, church. It's here, me, Sean, 7 Minutes with Sean. And this week's sermon was called The Cave. And we're going through our series on the life of David. And, if you know the backstory to all of what's going on in the book of Samuel, basically, David had been anointed king by Samuel while Saul was already king, right? So then David, this little boy, kind of junior high age, kills Goliath, becomes this hero in Israel. Um, Saul takes him from his family. He's living in the king's court now. Saul ends up as David as a young man and sends David to war. Everywhere David goes to war, he succeeds. He becomes this mighty warrior and a hero in Israel. And Saul becomes very jealous. As a matter of fact, there's one scene where David and his army come home from battle into the city of Jerusalem, and the women and the children go out into the streets, and they're singing, Saul has killed his thousands, but David is 10,000s. And Saul tries to kill David. As a matter of fact, he ends up chasing David through the desert of Israel. And time again, he'd have David trapped, and then something would happen, and he wouldn't be able to finish the job. The Philistines would attack, or the Moabites would attack, whatever it is. The different groups would attack Jerusalem, and Saul would have to go back. And the scene where we read from in Samuel 24, Saul has got David this time. He's got David on the run. David is hiding in the wilderness in a place called En Gedi, in a cave. And Saul and his men come upon the cave, and they're out there probably watering their horses, getting their supplies going. And here's David and his men hiding deep in this cave. And it says that Saul goes to relieve himself. Right, he goes up into the cave to go pee, and while he's up there, David's men said, "This is it. This is the time the Lord said He would deliver Saul into your hands. Go and kill him." David creeps up. He doesn't kill him. He just cuts a corner of his robe off, and he comes back and he says he's conscience stricken. And he talks about how he can't touch the Lord's anointed, and that was a firm belief he had. And he ends up coming out of the cave and revealing himself to Saul. Saying, "I'm not here to kill you. I'm your servant. I'm a servant of the king." And Saul repents to a degree and says, "I know, David, that you're not here to kill me, and that you are God's man, and the throne will belong to you." And he promises David, asks him to make an oath not to wipe his family out, or wipe his name from the annals of history. And so we have this sermon or this passage, and what I talked about this week, and there's a lot of angles you could take, but really I started with the cave. David's in the cave. He's trapped. He feels there's no way out. There's nothing. I mean, he's a dead man, and he's in there. And I don't know if you've ever. I think most of us have been in some sort of cave in our life where we've had some sort of trial where we felt trapped. How are we going to get out of this? What are we going to do? And he feels trapped. That's kind of the cave, and all of us have our own caves that we've been in. So the second part I talked about was the trap, actually, because when you're in the cave, when it seems like there's no way out, it seems dark, it seems like there's no hope. People with good intentions, and including yourself, you will want to compromise your values, the very things you believe to be true, to get out of the cave. And I want to tell you, in this instance, David did not compromise his values. He believed that Saul was the Lord's anointed, and only God would take him off the throne. He was not going to physically do it. And that's a powerful thing when you think about it. When you live by your values, even in the darkest places, and what happens when you're in those dark places and you live by your values is there's the forge, and your character becomes forged. And I shared about how President Lincoln had this life of tragedy, and he had lots of dark caves. Um, but I believe in those dark caves, his mother died when he was 9. His fiance died. He had 3 of his 4 children died. His wife had mental illness. He had mental illness. He was very unpopular as a president. He, right after getting inaugurated, which would be this great celebration, right after that, boom, the South succeeds. They go into war. When the South the war is over and the South surrenders, he's shot 6 days later. but he's known as one of the greatest presidents in history. And here's why: because he went through the forge, and in all of those dark caves he was in, he held to his values. He held to what he believed was true. He held to what he believed God was calling him to do. And I used an analogy too about a guy who got his roof torn off during Superstorm Sandy, and they said his response was, "Sometimes you got to get your roof torn off to see the stars." And it's in those caves, it's in those dark places that God forges your character. But here's the last part, was the sacrifice. See, in every Old Testament, everywhere in the Bible, Jesus is the capital of the Bible. Just like Washington, D.C. is the capital of America, every road begins and ends in Washington, D.C. You can get on a road right now, and eventually all the roads connect, but they all end at the capital. Well, Jesus Christ is the capital of the Scriptures. And when you go through the Scriptures, you find that he is in all of it. And here's David deep in the cave and Saul out there. And David could have killed Saul. Saul deserved death. He was worthy of death, but David didn't. And as a matter of fact, Saul goes back to his throne. He acknowledges to David, "Hey, you're the true king of Israel." But he goes back to his throne. And here's what I want you to understand: Jesus Christ really is a David type for us. He took the deepest, darkest cave for us. Because of my sin, I deserve to be separated from God for eternity. But Jesus took that separation on the cross when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He took my sin on. He took the cave. He should have killed me and taken the throne of my life, but he didn't. And that's the other thing. Saul never surrendered his throne to David, even though he knew he was a true king. And you and I, if we're really honest, there's areas of our life where we struggle surrendering to the lordship of Jesus Christ. And in your growth group, that's a place where you can pray for each other and talk about that. And hopefully you're beginning to feel safe with each other in those places, because we all have those areas where we struggle. And, for some people, it's their finances. For some people, it's their time. For some people, it's trusting God in a certain situation. For some people, it's a habit that they just can't let go of. And they just that's the one area of their life they need control of. And surrendering that to God would freak them out. So anyways, go through the study, pray for each other, and guys, have a great week. Go be the church.